A full slate of insiders alongside 11 days before the deadline. We've already gone well beyond identifying buyers and sellers. We can now start linking buyers with sellers. And Ottawa and Winnipeg seem like very realistic dance partners if Ottawa doesn't sign Stone and or Duchene. So before we get to the Jets and Sens, where are the Sens at with Stone and Duchene?
Well, James, I would say the beat goes on. And the party line out of Ottawa has been that negotiations are continuing. And I think that is accurate in every way, shape, and form. We did expect that there's going to be a push by the Ottawa Senators this week to try to get Mark Stone and or Matt Duchene to sign a contract. Now, it's too early to say, and I know we've said this many times before, we're probably going to need another day or two or three to see if there's any traction from the latest push by the Ottawa Senators, but that's where we kind of stand. But I also think it's fair to say that the Ottawa Senators, out of necessity, now have to work both sides of the street, negotiate over here with those guys, but also look at their trade options. And that's why General Manager Pierre Dorion, along with his assistants, Jim Clark and Peter McTavish, are in Winnipeg tonight for the Jets game, and will stay in Winnipeg and continue to scout the Jets and the Manitoba Moose of the American Hockey League. So negotiations over here, trade talks and trade investigation over here.
And in Minnesota, you have the coach over here and the GM over here. Bruce Boudreau is guaranteed his team's going to make the playoffs, but he hasn't been guaranteed he'll have all his weapons in order to make the playoffs after the deadline. Explain.
Yeah, interesting 24 hours in Minnesota. My colleague Mike Russo at The Athletic revealing that owner Craig Leopold had a sit-down meeting with GM Paul Fenton in which he said, do what you got to do to retool this team if that's what you wish to do, despite the fact the Minnesota Wild are in a playoff race. Reminds of St. Louis a year ago that traded Stastny when they were in a playoff spot. So here we go. Core players such as Coyle, Granlund, Zucker, Brodin, all potentially in play either before this deadline or in the offseason. But the guy to really keep an eye on is Eric Staal, of course, because he's a pending UFA. He doesn't want to go anywhere. He has a 10-team modified no trade clause. Oh, but it's a good one. It's a 10-team list that we're told is vastly populated with all the obvious contenders. I'm not convinced that he'd want to waive. We'll see.
We all agree, I think, that Edmonton goalie Cam Talbot needs a fresh start somewhere. Could that be Philadelphia?
Yeah, preliminary trade talks between the Philadelphia Flyers and the Edmonton Oilers. And I mean preliminary. I mean, they're talking about the basics here. What's interesting, though, is, Cam Talbot does also have the modified no-trade clause. And the Oilers needed permission to talk to the Philadelphia Flyers. And my understanding is they were granted the right to talk to the Flyers. Now, the expectation is that Edmonton would have to get a goalie back. Maybe it's Stolarz, maybe it's McKenna. But the sweet deal in all of this, aside from giving Talbot a fresh opportunity, is the cap relief, and they need that to make room for Andrej Sekera.
Calgary Flames goaltender David Rittich has not been right on top of his game lately, so that sparked lots of questions about whether the Calgary Flames need to go out before the deadline and make an acquisition. Do they go get a rental like Jimmy Howard from the Detroit Red Wings, or do they go to the Los Angeles Kings and try to see if Jonathan Quick might be a longer-term solution for the Calgary net? What I can tell you at this point is, while obviously all options remain on the table and they want to see how Rittich and Mike Smith fare between now and the deadline, I think it's fair to say that the management team in Calgary has a lot more faith in their goaltending right now than a lot of fans and media, but that's obviously a developing story, and we'll stay on it.
Back to Philly for a second. Wayne Simmonds has been linked to a lot of contenders, a lot of times by the fan bases of those contenders because they really want Wayne Simmonds. Is there any chance he doesn't go anywhere?
There is a chance he stays put. I think it's a very specific circumstance, which is that the Flyers 10 days from now are 2 or 3 points out of a playoff spot, and that the offers that Chuck Fletcher, the GM of the Flyers, has in front of him are not at the level that he believes are worth trading a popular player and teammate like Wayne Simmonds. I think it's more likely than not still that Wayne Simmonds is dealt to a contender, but keep that in mind that signing him, keeping him as an own rental, also secondary options behind obviously moving him.
Toronto's one of those fan bases that seems to covet Simmonds, but they have other things to take care of, like signing Kasperi Kapanen to a new deal. And that one's a little bit complicated as they edge closer to that cap.
Yeah, and it's believed that Kasperi Kapanen's agent and Kyle Dubas of the Toronto Maple Leafs are going to engage in at least an exploratory discussion next week. Talk about the potential of a multi-year extension. What about a bridge deal if the player is even remotely interested in that? Just kind of get that dialogue going. What I know is that teams are curious on the trade front, and the Toronto Maple Leafs, because of cap implications, know that Kasperi Kapanen could also be an offer sheet threat if it gets to that point in the summer.
Getting more expensive by the day. 18 goals on the season, 3 in his last 2 games.